In this video, we will be going through what happened in the last GPT update, which is called Sycophancy. Sycophancy in GPT-4, what happened, what we're doing about it. So for active users of ChatGPT, if you use the latest updates, this specifically for paid users, I can guarantee users on the free tier, but for paid users, if you observed within the last 2 weeks of using ChatGPT, if you noticed a bit overly supportive tone and ChatGPT being a bit less factual and trying to get you much more positive than usual, then you observe what is called psychophancy. So psychophancy in GPT, what happened, what we're doing about it. OpenAI released a communication on how and why this happened. So we would be going through that, just cutting right to the pieces and seeing how they were able to, what happened, how they cut it, and what they'll be doing on this. So they mentioned that they rolled back the update with the psychophancy behavior. They rolled that back just to mitigate the issue, but this is what you're saying, that they rolled back last week update, so people are now using an earlier version with more balanced behavior, and they're actively testing new fixes to address the issue, which is the psychophancy issue, which is just like a behavior just to being like overly more supportive, overly more positive, just to gain maybe gain positive or gain some intentions from someone. So if we quickly check Google, what Google says is psychophancy is an obscure behavior towards someone important in order to gain advantage. So that's just like the model being overly supportive just to make you want to use it more or just to support you. And that can have both positive, but more importantly, very negative effect. So looking at what happened, they recall making an adjustment of this so they were keen on improving the model's default personality to make it more intuitive across a variety of tasks, and they did the shaping well, and they taught the models how to apply these principles, also following user signal. Now, in the update, they observed that they focused too much on short-term feedback and did not fully account for how users' interactions with ChatGPT would evolve over time. So basically, they were looking at the next thing they wanted to achieve with the model, but they were not accounting for how the usage or how people have been using ChatGPT over time. And it has gotten very stickier. What that means is a lot of people use ChatGPT more intimately, and it's literally become like the go-to personal assistant for most people. People ask all sort of questions to ChatGPT. So what they're saying is they did not account for that. And what happened is the personality change that was affected, that made people experience trusted psychophantic interactions can be uncomfortable. Now, if you look at scenarios where people communicate with ChatGPT asking questions about mental health, or when someone is depressed and trying to make negative remarks, and if you're having a model with this type of behavior, the model is going to be overly supportive even when the intending actions are not going to be good on the user. So that's why this is actually a big issue. And our goal from the doc, our goal is to help users explore ideas, make decisions. So they are steering it towards much more positive outcomes. But in this scenario, the issue is, irrespective of the prompt, irrespective of the questions, the model was quite positive and supportive. We've designed ChatGPT default personality to reflect our mission and be useful. However, each of these desirable qualities, like attempting to be useful or supportive, can have unintended side effects, which is true. And they have a staggering 500 million people using ChatGPT every week. A single default can capture every preference. True. So how are they addressing this is they made some changes, they added more guardrails, and expanding ways for more users to test and give direct feedback before deployment. And they're also expanding their evaluations, building on the model spec. So the complexity here is kind of increasing because of how people have been interacting more and more and more. And in so doing, just a change in the behavior can get very, very negative, and it can also get very positive. So trying to catch all the negative is not really easy, is what they're pointing out. And they are saying first and unknown unknowns is what I call this, about sometimes trying to make something safe and supportive could also turn back to bite in terms of if the prompts are negative. So they are saying they believe the user should have more control, and to the extent that it is safe and feasible, make adjustments if they do not agree with the behavior. So now what they are now doing is shifting the responsibility of adjusting the model behavior to a user, which is quite interesting. Today, users can give the model specific instructions to shape its behavior with features like custom instructions. So they are trying to start reducing how much of the piece they control so that the blame or the consequences of wrong usage is definitely not going to be on them. That's quite smart. So we're also building new and easier ways for users to do this, and we're explaining new ways to incorporate. So this was the first release they gave as a result of the Sycophancy stuff. This was just the first one, just to keep everyone at peace. I'm also quite interested in how they caught this. I think they saw a lot of outrage, maybe from Twitter or other platform, where people have been observing some strange behaviors of the model being overly positive, and they also had their in-house expert users who also gave some feedback, but that can be very subjective. So let's look at the more detailed one, and this was released like a few days back, and they're giving like a bit of a deeper dive into what they missed. So again, when it happened and how they wrote out an update that made the model more psychophantic, it aimed to place the user, which is true, not just as flattery, but also as validating doubts, fueling anger, urging impulsive action. So what that means is if a user puts something like, I would like to drink alcohol till like I get extremely drunk, the model can be very supportive of that, which it should not be. Or if people are a bit delusional, the model would be supportive, which is like the wrong behavior here, or reinforcing negative emotions in ways that were not intended. Beyond that, just being uncomfortable and unsettling, definitely this kind of behavior can raise safety concerns, which is again some of the mission for this company. So they began to roll the update back. They did a rollback, and earlier this week they shared initial details, which is what we just read, and how they update the models. This is a little bit of technical stuff on how models are being updated. For folks that are technical, you should give it a read. Now, how they currently review models before deployment, and this is a bit to shed a bit of light on why this wasn't caught and how their current process is like. They have different spot checks, different evaluation, different safety mechanism to ensure that before a model goes out, the necessary checks are in place. But for some reason, they were not able to catch this. So these are the things they check. These are the things they have. Offline evaluation, spot check, expert testing. They have safety evals on different categories, and they have the small scale A/B test. So once we believe a model is potentially good, improvement for our users, including running our safety checks, we run A/B tests with a small number of our users, which is like the final way of validating. Now, what went wrong in training? This is also a bit technical. What went wrong, what they did, how it was different. But why did we not catch this? Now, this is the core of this piece. Why was this not caught? Now, one of the kickoff problem with this launch was that our offline evals, especially those testing behavior, generally look good. This is interesting. So internally, the offline evals, which is what we just looked briefly above, look good. The A/B test seems to indicate that a small number of users who tried the model liked it, definitely, because it's small. There'll be some that like it, some that did not. While we've had discussions about risk related to this for a while, Sycophancy wasn't explicitly flagged. So I'm guessing here they didn't have like a specific metric or a specific way of catching something called Sycophancy internally. So some of our expert testers were more concerned about the change. So they had these expert testers who gave their opinions, but obviously subjective. They would definitely raise concerns, and most likely they would always have concerns. Nevertheless, some expert testers had indicated that it felt slightly off. So if you have 10 expert testers and 2 are saying it felt slightly off, you might not necessarily like take it serious, right? Given that the other 8 said it's good. So that's the issue with this type. Now, they didn't have specific deployment evaluation to track Sycophancy. So now this is interesting, which is the unknown unknowns with this AI model. And as it gets more sophisticated, there will be more different behaviors that would be determined on the fly. So they didn't have a specific evaluation to track this, and because of that, this is what they had: mirroring, emotional reliance, and all those things. But for Sycophancy specifically, they did not have. Then they had a decision to make, and based on only the subjective flag of the expert testers, in the end, they decided to proceed. So when they had a decision to make, should they withhold deploying this despite the positive evals they had internally, and the users that they tested with A/B test said they were good. But the only a bit negative was from the subjective flags of the expert testers. They still proceeded to release, and that was the wrong call because they built this for the users, and because, which I'm putting out a theory, is that because of how the usage of this platform has evolved over time, it would not be easy to account for how such behavior will play out globally. So you can't really say what people would put and what that behavior will support. Now, it was until they made that release that it was quite obvious that, okay, like this is not good. Supporting negative behavior is far from some of the visions of the company or core of the company, which is safe AI. And that was when they started noticing that like we need to actually roll back, and they were picking up on a blind spot, and this our offline evals weren't broad or deep enough to catch. Definitely sometimes the model spec explicitly discourages, and our ABMB didn't have the right signals, which is all fine. So how did they address this? They took immediate action. They did some rollback, then they started working on something. Now, how or what are they doing to improve this? So this is the changes they've been making to their process just to ensure this doesn't happen again. Introducing an opt-in alpha testing phase, so much more extra phases before it gets publicly or globally rolled out. Explicitly approve model behavior for each launch, weighing both quantitative and qualitative signals. That's good. So they would consider all categories of behavior based on the past experience or past usage and weigh. They introducing this, had more spot check, interactive testing, much improvements, much stuff, and they would definitely be communicating more, not leaving things bleak, because I would say that it was a bit not easy to find out that your model is being positive, finding out on the public platform. So what are they learning? We need to treat model behavior issues as launch blocking, like we do with other safety risks. This is true. Because if you release a model and the model is not acting in line with what we term to be safe, it can be very catastrophic. Now, we need to be critical of metrics that conflict with qualitative testing. Evals won't catch everything, which is the importance of interpretability, and there's no such thing as a small launch. Very true. So one of the biggest lessons is recognizing that people are started to use ChatGPT for deeply personal advice. Now, this is something people or no one would have predicted easily. And because of that, that's exactly what's happening. So because of how people are really locked into this platform, it becomes more and more crucial what gets rolled out to people. So you don't want to roll out the wrong thing that is unsafe, unhealthy, or is a bit risky, because you might be causing a very negative thing on a global scale. Something we didn't see as much even a year ago. At the time, the primary focus, at the time this wasn't the primary focus, but as AI and society have co-evolved, it's become clear that we need to treat this use case with urgent care. What they mean by that is you need to understand that what you're building now, you're actually altering and affecting lives directly. So this is similar to like this is like more like healthcare now. So the models are like healthcare. You have to be sure that whatever you're releasing, you're affecting life seriously. So these are high stake areas. It's similar to the aviation's marine softwares, things that if they go wrong, a lot of things will go very bad, is how they should be treating this. And that's what they are realizing now. It's now going to be a more meaningful part of our safety work. With so many people depending on a single system for guidance, we have a responsibility to adjust accordingly. This sheet reinforces why our work matters and why we need to keep raising the bar on this and this to the ways people actually use AI in their lives. So that's quite interesting. They saw firsthand some unknown unknowns. They saw firsthand the importance of not just casually dismissing something. They also saw firsthand of how their platform has evolved over time and how it interacts or affects or alters human behavior. So it's quite interesting, and let me know in the comments if you guys face this, if you observe the change in the behavior, and what do you think on how they handled it. That's it for this video. Bye.